1. In my previous life, my husband unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack. By the time I reached the hospital, the doctors had already covered him with a white sheet. I couldn't bear the shock and fainted. When I regained consciousness, my mother-in-law had already taken him for cremation. All that remained was a group of intimidating men surrounding my bed, demanding repayment. It was then I discovered that my husband hadn't paid his construction workers for 6 months. Now that he was gone, it fell upon me to settle the debts. 5 years later, I found myself on my knees scrubbing floors in a 5-star hotel in the CBD. To my disbelief, I spotted my supposedly deceased husband enjoying wine and a buffet with a meticulously made-up woman. I recognized her. She had caused a scene at my wedding. My husband had thrown her out, branding her a crazy woman. In disbelief, I approached them to confirm his identity. He looked at me with disdain and had security drag me away. "Connie, I can't believe you're still so infatuated with me. You're really quite the fool. Let me be honest. Yvonne is the woman I truly love. If it weren't for your father's resources, a useless woman like you wouldn't even be worthy to carry my shoes. You have no idea, do you? On our wedding night, instead of working overtime, I was with Yvonne. That day, consumed by despair, I lost my footing and fell down the stairs, dying on impact. As my thoughts returned to the present, I saw my mother-in-law performing her act of sorrow, and I made a firm decision. In my last life, this scoundrel had caused my father's death, faked his own demise to steal a fortune, and lived happily with his mistress and vile mother. This time I would ensure he met his true end. 2. Watching my mother-in-law hand me a glass of water with feigned sincerity, I understood why I had fainted in my previous life. Though I had been heartbroken, I was fully aware. After drinking that glass of water, I had become drowsy and slept for days. I reached out to take the water, then pretended to spill it on her. It was laced with a high dose of drugs, and she rushed off to clean herself. Seizing the opportunity, I lifted the sheet covering Alex. His face was pale, lips tightly shut, a perfect act. His breathing was steady. It was clear he wasn't truly dead. In my previous life, I hadn't suspected a thing and didn't bother to check. While my mother-in-law was preoccupied, I contacted the crematorium. I had saved their contact information when my father passed, and it proved useful now. The vehicle held only Alex and me besides the driver. As memories of my previous life flooded back, how this scoundrel had ruined my family and left me destitute, hatred surged within me. I had already devised a plan for his torment back at the hospital. I brought a thermos filled with boiling water. Now I pulled Alex's arm and poured the scalding liquid over it. His fair skin instantly turned crimson, and his body reflexively recoiled. Leaning close to his ear, I whispered, "Alex, do you believe in karma? Those who fake death often end up truly dead." Then, I poured the remainder of the drugged water my mother-in-law had given me down his throat. He wouldn't wake up to thwart my plans. 3. A sudden stop jolted the car as it was blocked from proceeding. By the time I realized what was happening, my mother-in-law and Yvonne had rushed over, their faces a mixture of anger and panic. My mother-in-law yanked open the car door, unleashing a torrent of curses at me. "Connie, you wretch! Where are you taking my son? Are you trying to kill him?" She lunged at me, but Yvonne quickly intervened, feigning concern and pulling her back. I forced myself to look deeply sorrowful, masking the anger simmering beneath. "Mom, what are you talking about? Alex is already dead. I'm taking him for cremation. You took him away without telling me. How can I trust you? What if you killed him and are trying to cover it up?" I regarded her pathetic acting with disdain, my patience wearing thin. "If you don't trust me, then get in the car. In this heat, he'll start to smell if we don't cremate him soon. Alex always loved cleanliness. I'm sure he wouldn't want to rot after death, right, Mom?" Her face flickered through various shades of disbelief, unable to muster a retort. After all, cremation is the natural course for the deceased. She exchanged a furtive glance with Yvonne before reluctantly climbing into the car, the tension palpable in the air. Yvonne attempted to follow, but I shoved her hard, sending her sprawling onto the pavement. "Who do you think you are? What business do you have with my husband's cremation?" Yvonne clutched her stomach, wincing in exaggerated pain. My mother-in-law quickly got out to help her, concern briefly overtaking her fury. Yvonne is carrying Alex's child, Connie. Don't blame Alex for this. It's your fault for not being able to have children. Now that he's gone, his child must be protected at all costs. I had been married to Alex for 6 long years without a child, enduring relentless torment from my mother-in-law. Her constant psychological manipulation had left me feeling guilty and weak, always striving to meet their impossible demands. I never imagined that my concessions would lead to him fathering a child with another woman. Are we going or not? You can't park here. The driver's impatient shout cut through the thick tension, prompting us to move on. 4. We soon arrived at the crematorium, where Alex was scheduled to be the 5th for cremation. Mom, you and Miss Yvonne should wait in the lobby. This place has a heavy atmosphere. It might affect her pregnancy. After all, she's carrying Alex's only child. Martha slapped me hard, her anger palpable. You little wretch. If you hadn't squandered all his money, he wouldn't have worked himself to death. You're the last person who deserves to be here. In the past, Martha always thought I was worthless, unworthy of her son, constantly reminding me of my supposed failings. She conveniently forgot that before meeting me, Alex was a struggling man who could barely afford a meal. After our marriage, I discovered that Yvonne was Alex's unattainable first love, a painful truth buried beneath their facade of happiness. She had demanded a dowry of $50,000, which Martha couldn't afford, so she forced Alex to settle for me. I had pitied his struggles and used all of my father's resources to pave his way, believing it was my duty. Yet, the more I gave, the more they took, betraying my father and driving him to bankruptcy and despair. Now they plotted to fake Alex's death and leave me with the financial ruin. I refused to let that happen. The staff informed us it was Alex's turn for cremation. Martha grabbed my arm, desperation flashing in her eyes as she tried to stop me from pushing the stretcher. I shook her off and, in a moment of pent-up rage, slapped her twice, the sound echoing in the still air. Martha, stop pretending to be a loving mother. You have no idea, do you? Your beloved son despised you. He wished for your death. Remember when you were hit by a car and ended up in the ICU? He didn't want to save you. If it weren't for me bringing in an expert from Beijing, you two would already be reunited in the afterlife. Her eyes widened in shock, but disbelief lingered as she lunged for me again. I don't believe you. You're lying, you venomous woman. Do you know why your leg still hurts? Because your precious son didn't want to spend money on you. The hospital used the cheapest materials. It's a miracle you can even walk. Alex, you ungrateful wretch. I raised you with such difficulty. You deserve to die. She screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. In her madness, Martha lunged forward, pushing her son into the furnace. Yvonne's attempt to intervene was futile, the flames crackling ominously. With a sickening realization, I watched as Alex began to burn, the reality of his death settling in the air like smoke. I didn't know if he was conscious at that moment, the horror of it all hanging heavy around us. Yvonne stood frozen, shock giving way to fury as she turned on Martha. Martha, you venomous woman. Alex wasn't dead. He's your son. Martha, coming back to herself, started to grasp the enormity of what she had done. Regret washed over her face like a tidal wave. Connie, you manipulated me into killing my son. I'll call the police. You must pay with your life. Go ahead. I'll help you. Martha, in her frantic state, only wanted to shift the blame, but I genuinely called the police. Alex faking his death was their conspiracy, and Martha pressing the button made it murder. Yvonne's attempts to intervene wouldn't save her. I was ready to stand my ground. 5. Sensing things had spiraled out of control, Yvonne turned to flee. I swiftly pulled her back. Her face turned pale, fear evident in her eyes. This place is filled with bad energy. I'm pregnant with Alex's child. I can't take any chances. The child isn't Alex's. Martha's expression morphed into one of shock. Connie, what nonsense are you spouting? If it's not Alex's, whose could it possibly be? Because I'm not the one who can't have children. It's Alex. Both Martha and Yvonne looked as if they had been struck by lightning. In my previous life, I had always believed I was the problem. Besides being forced by Martha to consume countless dubious concoctions, I secretly visited various specialists. All confirmed that my body was perfectly fine. Despite this, I thought it was merely a matter of fate that I hadn't conceived yet. It wasn't until I heeded the doctor's advice and discreetly had Alex's fluids tested that I discovered he was infertile. You claim it's not true, but that doesn't change the facts. With Alex gone, you think you can slander me? Know this. All of Alex's assets will belong to my child, and you'll get nothing. I couldn't help but scoff at her naivete. Is that so? Just because Alex has passed doesn't mean there aren't ways to confirm paternity. We can have Martha tested to see if she's the grandmother. Unless, of course, you plan to get rid of her as well. Martha, now seething, lashed out at me, calling me a murderer. The staff had prepared Alex's urn, and Yvonne thought she could finally escape this situation. But as we stepped outside, we were greeted by the police. I rushed over, feigning heartbreak. Officer, my mother-in-law and my husband's lover conspired to kill him. You must help me. I tearfully recounted the entire ordeal. As Martha and Yvonne contradicted each other, both were taken into custody. In the meantime, I headed to Alex's company. Although he had moved most assets, the bulk of the money remained in his name. Armed with Alex's death certificate, I transferred everything into my own account, changing the ownership of all properties to my name. To my surprise, I found that Alex had secretly purchased numerous properties, all of which now belonged to me. I settled the construction workers with $500,000, knowing they were just hard-working people cheated by Alex. Having sorted everything out, I returned to my usual villa and enjoyed a well-deserved rest. 6. The next morning, loud banging jolted me awake. Martha and Alex's uncle Bob were at my door, causing a scene. "Connie, you little wretch. Get out here. If you don't, I'll make you pay." The surveillance footage captured their shenanigans, with Bob splashing paint on my door. I decided to watch their antics from the comfort of my bed. Seeing that I still hadn't responded, Bob threw another bucket of paint and continued shouting. Finally unable to tolerate their ruckus, I opened the door and unleashed my dog. Yes, I had a large black dog named Max. Max looked quite intimidating, and both of them fell to the ground in fright. "Connie, you murderer. First you killed my son, and now you're unleashing your dog on me." I leaned back, enjoying their pitiful state, and chuckled. "Don't worry. My dog isn't just a savage." Seeing that Max wasn't attacking, Bob regained some courage and continued his tirade. "You little wretch. Stop scaring my sister. I'm Alex's uncle. All his property belongs to me. If you don't hand it over, I'll camp right here. Do you think you deserve Alex's assets? An uncle like you has no claim. I'm carrying Alex's child, and the money belongs to us." Yvonne had arrived with a few thugs, clearly not planning to back down. This time they weren't targeting me. Martha immediately began to berate Yvonne. "You whore. Who knows whose child you're carrying? You think you can snatch my son's inheritance?" Last night, Yvonne had called, proposing a deal. She would provide a recording of Alex's fake death plan in exchange for a share of his assets. I readily agreed, eager to see them fight. Sure enough, a brawl broke out. Martha and Bob, both over 50, stood no chance against the younger hooligans and quickly found themselves on the ground, battered. Soon after, someone called the police, and we were all taken in for questioning. 7. As we entered the station, Martha launched into an Oscar-worthy performance, collapsing at the officer's feet, sobbing. "Officer, I'm an old widow. My son is dead. Please help me. My husband died young, and now my son is gone. How can I possibly go on living?" Martha had nothing to worry about. Soon enough, she'd have room and board at the station. The officers pulled her up and played the recording, asking her to recount her story clearly. "Officer, these two women conspired to kill my son and now want to kill me. You saw it. They set a dog on me and hired thugs to attack me." Yvonne, enraged, spat back. "You shameless old hag. You hated Connie for being childless, but didn't want a divorce to split assets. You and Alex faked his death. You pressed the button for the cremation. How is this my fault? You little vixen. You seduced my son trying to replace Connie. Who knows whose child you're carrying? Ha! Slander? Officer, I have the recording. You'll hear for yourself if I'm lying." Yvonne played the recording, which contained all their plans, transferring assets, faking death, and drugging me. She cleverly left out her own voice. Martha, realizing she was cornered, fell silent. I added fuel to the fire. Officer, a mother's love is fierce, but Martha is a monster. She abused Alex as a child and had an incestuous relationship with her brother, Bob, resulting in a disabled son. Everyone was stunned. Alex had revealed this in a moment of vulnerability, seeking my sympathy. Martha's husband died when Alex was 2. She returned to her family where Bob ruled. To avoid being thrown out, she gave in to his perverse demands, resulting in a pregnancy she had to hide. Bob's wife bore him 3 daughters and no sons, so he took Martha's son, only to find he was disabled. Alex had to support both families as a teenager. While some people strengthen through adversity, others like Alex remain rotten at the core. Martha, still pleading innocence, was eventually sentenced to life in prison. Bob was fined for public disorder and property damage, choosing jail over payment. Yvonne was detained for incitement. As for me, I returned home with my dog, Max, who had a license and was properly restrained. 8. These punishments were insufficient. My father's death was on all their heads. With Alex dead and Martha imprisoned, I couldn't let Yvonne off easily. Why should my father, who used all his resources to help Alex, die while they lived happily? The next day, I drove to Yvonne's hometown. She and Alex were from the same county but different towns. In high school, poor but brilliant Alex attracted kindred spirit Yvonne. Her father, valuing sons over daughters, often beat her when drunk. Alex's mother, unhappy with her life, vented her frustrations on him. Their shared misery sparked a romance. High school didn't allow much freedom, and their relationship was soon exposed. The parents were called in. Yvonne's father demanded $50,000 for Alex to marry her, while Martha accused Yvonne of seducing her son. Thus, a pure love was crushed. Soon after, Yvonne was sold to an older butcher for $60,000, while Alex went to college and met me. Yvonne shared these stories, still immersed in her love for Alex, though he was dead. But it wasn't my concern, I was the real victim. I first noticed Alex in math class, where he sat attentively while others dozed off. I lived in a wealthy circle, unconcerned about the future, but Alex intrigued me. I hired him as a tutor, and friends teased me for falling for a poor boy. In hindsight, I was foolish, seeking excitement in my privileged life. Alex pretended to love me, using my money to buy me small gifts which touched me deeply. After graduation, my father opposed our relationship, but Alex manipulated me into defying him and moving into a basement apartment. My father reluctantly helped Alex start a business, giving him unlimited access to resources, which Alex used to ruin my father's company. When my father went bankrupt, Alex's business thrived, and he claimed his company was struggling. After 2 hours of driving, I reached Yvonne's town and easily found the butcher's house. 9. I knocked on the door, met by a menacing man in his 40s with a limp. When I mentioned Yvonne, he let me in. That whore. You know where she is? Yes. Where? She's in the city with her first love, pregnant with his child. That whore. Tell me where she is. I'll kill her. Wait, who are you? He eyed me suspiciously. I'm her lover's wife. Before I could finish, he grabbed my neck, glaring. If he took my woman, I'll make you pay. Desperate, I kicked him hard and he yelped in pain. You bitch. Enter my house and I'll show you my ways. Stop. I'm here to make a deal. Here is $10,000. Mentioning money shifted his demeanor from lecherous to greedy. Well, why didn't you say you were a generous lady? I was just testing your resolve earlier. That woman cost me $60,000. Now she's cheating on me? I won't let her off. If you ensure Yvonne never leaves your house again, I'll give you an additional $50,000 and help treat your leg. His eyes glinted with interest. Deal. He quickly packed a few things and I brought him back to the city, putting him up in a hotel. The next day we put our plan into action. 10. Yvonne had set up a meeting with a lawyer to discuss splitting the assets. Connie, I've brought the contract. If everything looks good, let's sign it. Are you sure the child you're carrying is Alex's? Yvonne smirked confidently. Of course it is. I spent every day with Alex these past months. Don't think you can back out now. I helped you with a major problem. I'm not like that idiot Martha. If you don't sign today, once the baby is born, you won't get a dime. Is that so? But what if the baby isn't born? You bitch. How dare you curse my child? I'll. Before she could finish, the butcher crashed into the room, limping and wild-eyed. He slapped Yvonne hard, sending her sprawling. You whore. Running away and getting knocked up with another man's child. I paid $60,000 for you and this is how you repay me. I'll kill you. He began hitting her mercilessly. Yvonne, realizing the gravity of her situation, began to cry and beg. Honey, please stop. I was wrong. I won't do it again. Ignoring her pleas, he continued to slap her. Yvonne, dressed up in hopes of claiming her share of Alex's assets, now looked a mess. Connie, you witch. I'll drag you to hell with me. Unable to fight back against the butcher, she hurled insults at me. Honey, please stop. You'll hurt our baby. This child isn't Alex's, it's yours. I swear it's yours. The butcher paused, loosening his grip on her hair. I'm 3 months pregnant. It happened right before I left. Honey, this child is yours. May I and the baby die if I'm lying? Fine, but if the baby isn't mine, you know what'll happen. Yvonne, crushed by her failed schemes, reluctantly signed the contract I had prepared, stating she had no claim to Alex's assets and acknowledging the child wasn't his. One more thing. All the gifts Alex gave you, bags, jewelry, return them. They were bought with our shared assets. Defeated, Yvonne left with the butcher. 11. Connie, the luxury goods and jewelry you sent were all fakes. The second-hand store won't take them. My friend who ran a second-hand shop informed me that everything Yvonne sent was counterfeit. Given Alex's wealth, he could have easily bought genuine items. But he loved only himself. The butcher called to confirm he had locked Yvonne in their house, ensuring she'd never escape again. With all loose ends tied up, I put all the properties on the market. I hired professionals to manage Alex's company and lived off the dividends. 5 years passed swiftly. I found myself back at the CBD hotel, enjoying a buffet and wine, relishing the good life. Upon leaving, I spotted a familiar figure, a hunched, ragged Yvonne begging on the street. Her hair was gray, and she dragged a broken leg, struggling to move. Seeing me, she whimpered, Connie, please give me something to eat. The butcher kicked me out after I had the baby. He broke my leg. Please help me. It was early winter, and Yvonne was in tattered clothes, emaciated. In my previous life, I had suffered similarly because of her. Reflecting on it, while Yvonne and I had no direct animosity, my past suffering was significantly influenced by her actions. I couldn't forgive her. Yvonne, you brought this upon yourself. Your greed and ambition led to this. You should have known there would be consequences. With that, I walked away, determined never to let such people affect my life again. 12. From birth to schooling and marriage, I had lived in this city. With my father gone, I had no ties left here. I visited his grave to say goodbye. Dad, I'm sorry for being blind back then and causing all this. I miss you so much. Now it's just me. I'm leaving for a faraway place, but I'll visit often. Returning home, I found an unwelcome visitor at my door. Bob, Alex's uncle. Connie, that witch Martha buried her son on my land. You need to move him. It was laughable. 5 years ago, he had taken money to help Martha bury Alex. Now he wanted to move the grave, claiming it was cursing his son. When you took Martha's money and helped bury him, you didn't seem to mind. Now you want to move him. Alex's presence curses my son. How else do you explain my son's worsening condition? Are you saying his grave affects your son? Yes. Otherwise, why would my son become more and more foolish? With Bob's limited intelligence, it was no wonder his son wasn't bright. Fine. Martha's in prison for life, she won't care. Do whatever you want with the ashes. Throw them in the sea for all I care. Are you serious? Absolutely. Satisfied, Bob left, likely to dump the ashes as he saw fit. I booked the earliest flight to Paris. These sordid people and events would no longer affect me. From now on, I would take control of my life. My journey was just beginning.